evil can only be overcome with good.
Well, considering all they've been through, can you really fault their response, Paul?
What did you tell them?
Love is the only way.
And after all you've seen, you still don't believe it.
This isn't anything I've seen. My God. This is a world in the grip of evil. This is Nero's circus. It's passionate hate. Blood washing down the street. Widows, orphans starving to death. Babies born with the slightest defect are disposed, dispatched, discarded. This world doesn't know a thing about love.
So you would give up on the world when Christ did not give up on us?
Why not?
No.
Why not?
Love is the only way. Love that suffers long. Love that is kind, that does not envy, that is not proud. Love that does not dishonor, that does not seek for itself. Love that is not easily angered. Love that rejoices in truth. Love that never delights in evil. Love that protects, trusts, hopes, endures all things. That kind of love. Give me your hand. Do you understand? Then write it down.
That's a scene from the movie Paul, Apostle of Christ. Hope you get to go see it. If you go see it, you don't have to come to church because that's what we're talking about. No, that's not true. Still got to come. I've got all the secret answers. So, a few years back, well, maybe a little more than a few, a while ago, the heavens broke open, and down came a little child, and I was born. And my mom brought me home, set me down in the bassinet, and she immediately laid down on the couch and fell fast asleep. My sister sat on the stairs right above the bassinet and listened to me cry and whine for 2 hours. So she crawled down the stairs, went over to my mom, opened her eyes and said, "I don't like him. Take him back." And thus began our beautiful, loving relationship of hostility, open hostility between my sister and I. We did not get along. We were not compatible in any possible way. And when I say open hostility, I mean open hostility. There are times where she just wailed on me and then stood there as Mom marched across the room to wail on her because she wailed on me, and standing there going, "It was worth it." Yeah, she's about 4 years older, so she had the upper hand for 17 years. 17 years. Now, in a strange sort of way, there was about once a year, we actually had one day that we'd get along. I don't know what that was all about, and then the next day all the rules went back to the way it was. So, open hostility with my sister is how I lived my life. And that's kind of where we discovered Paul last week. Paul doesn't start out as a good guy in this Bible story. He doesn't start out as a nice church-going folk. He starts out as a bad guy, a villain. He is after the church. And in chapter 9, we see a summary of really what he is all about. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He lived in open hostility. There was no two ways about it. He wasn't just annoyed with them. He went into their homes, dragging out the men and the women. There was hatred in his heart. There was hostility in his heart. Now, we saw from last week how God brings him down and breaks him and humbles him, and he humbly receives God's grace into his life. And what a dramatic change that becomes. He turns the villain of the story into his messenger. Powerful story. But that's not the only change that we see in Paul's life. I mean, this is a pretty tough place to kind of come from, this type of deep hatred in your life. What we're going to find is that Paul has this heart transformation as God begins to work in his life. We know this because Paul is the one that is going to write the love chapter. The love chapter of the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13. Now, this isn't a love chapter like what you're going to read in Harlequin novels or see on TV in a rom-com. It is a different type. But love is pretty core value for a lot of people. There's very few folks that go around going, yeah, I like hatred. Hatred's pretty good. I want to build my life on that. Everybody to some extent is going, love is really where it's at. They might draw that circle big, they might draw that circle small, but everybody's kind of going, this is a good thing in life, and so we're familiar with these. You got the romance part of this. This is drives us in kind of pursuing that right guy, that right girl, and all the emotions and chemicals in our brains and our bodies and all the things that kind of go with it, the excitement of it, the wonder of it. And you can feel so passionate about things, and we go, wow, this is such an incredible form of love, until it isn't. Until one of them comes and goes, well, I kind of ran out of love. I don't feel quite so much love anymore. It's great while it lasts, but, the harsh reality of life is that there's a lot of these relationships. No matter how promising they start, no matter how high the emotions soar, often have some type of crashing point and go, leaves us in bitter disappointment. Or you could have shows like Blue Bloods there. It's one of my favorite shows there. You think it's about a cop show, and it does have cop stuff in it, but it's really about a family. It's really about that tight-knit family and how they handle all their different responsibilities and tensions and pressures of life. And so it's a celebration of that, of this kind of familial bond. And we've seen lots of shows over the years that kind of celebrate that. The circumstances change. What they do in life isn't what matters. It's that they're in it together. And family is one of those most powerful love bonds that we can have in life. Right? It's great to celebrate that. God designed that. Until you get like the Homer Simpson family, right? You get that dysfunction in there, and suddenly family isn't just kind of something a rock that you stand on. It is a pain. It is a trouble. It is a bitterness for you because of what it ought to have been and what it is for you in your life. It's tough. Or maybe we think about love in terms of a broader scope, like what's celebrated in the Band of Brothers. You throw together a bunch of strangers. They're not related to another. They're not family. We're not talking about romance. You're talking about bringing some strangers together, but in an intense situation where they are bound together in loyalty, and they would come to a place of going, they love one another. There's this deep sense of bond that extends past that particular circumstance and will last their whole life long. We go, love is a great thing. Of course, that type of love is only as good as your loyalty is, because if you're disloyal, I'm going to give you loyalty if you give me yours. And that's it. That's as far as it goes. If you break that, what is it? Paul isn't going to write anything about any of these. He is going to a bedrock truth about what love is. he is going to write what no one else has ever written before, the capstone of everything that love is. He's going to write about unconditional love. Now you might go, well, hey, you know what, I'm kind of an unconditional love person, and I like a lot of people. I'm nice. But inevitably what we run into is the Linus problem. You know what the Linus problem is? I love mankind. It's the people I can't stand. Right? We like this idea of love until we get into particular circumstances, into particular people that nag us, that annoy us, that just rub us the wrong way, that anger us, that aggravate us. And suddenly the loving gets pretty thin. We love the people that are good to us. But Jesus even called that out. He said, you do realize that bad people do that too, right? Like mafia people are really nice to their family. They're nice to people that are nice to them. That's not real love if all you do is love those that love you back. That's unimpressive. Anyone can do that. Real love goes beyond that. And that's what Paul writes about in 1 Corinthians 13. He writes about this unconditional love, and this type of love that goes, I'm not dependent on what you're bringing to the table. I'm bringing a type of love that goes beyond that. And so he writes, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. It endures through any given situation. This type of love. All those other types of love, they fail. They have their breaking point. But this type of love, this real love, never comes to a breaking point. It never fails. How does a guy that was breathing murderous threats come up with this type of a paragraph? There's nothing in all of literature history that even comes close to this type of stuff. It is a powerful statement. I think a rather condemning statement. As soaring as it is, I feel convicted every time I read it. Because I'm reminded too much. Man, I thought I was doing all right. I thought I was a loving guy. I thought I was a nice guy. But, man, if this is the measure, good night. You know, we kind of walk around life going, we're decent folk. There's decent folk out in our community. We get along, you know. We use that line, oh, he's a good guy, you know. Right? We mean they're decent. What we really mean by that is that as adults, we've come to this place where we've learned how to take our bent towards selfishness and not eliminate it, but we civilize it. We're civil with one another. Until I touch that thing. Until I get to the thing that really matters to you. And then suddenly, holy mackerel. Oh, you're not going to do that to me. You're not going to take that. That's important to me. Suddenly now it's all about us. We mistake civilized selfishness for real love. It's not. Paul says it is not self-seeking. It keeps no record of wrong. How many times have you gone, oh, I'll forget about that. Oh, I'm over it. I'm past it. And you're not really. You got the list going in the back of your head. And you know you do because, you know, a month later, 6 months later, a year later, you're in another argument and suddenly, whoop, it comes up, oh, you did this. We keep our record of wrongs. We keep our scorecard. I know what you did to me. Paul goes, that's not real love. Real love is patient and kind. and it endures. It's long-suffering. How did he come to this? I mean, I don't think he went to a mountaintop or smoked something. He didn't just kind of come to a point of enlightenment. Where does this come from for Paul? Maybe it comes because Paul goes, this is the way that God loved me. Right? I was a villain. I was a bad guy. I know what I did. I know what God should have done to me in response. I know what I deserved. And yet God didn't keep the record of wrong. He didn't go, that's enough. I've had enough of Paul. I'm going to snuff him out. He suffered long. Paul knows this love because this is God's type of love. But still, that's kind of how God kind of loves. How does this kind of fit down into a person? How does this kind of get into his life? How do you go from what he was to this new type of person? Well, there's a letter that he writes later on in his ministry where he tries to kind of lay out, hey, this is my fullest understanding of what God is and what this is all about. It's the letter to the Romans. And there's a line in there that gives us a clue to kind of how he understands what's going on. It's in Romans chapter 5. He begins by going, hey, look, God knocks us down. He humbles us. And then he saves us. He makes us right. He brings peace into our life spiritually. He makes us peace with God, and that fills us with hope. He writes, and that type of hope doesn't put us to shame. It doesn't lead us down the wrong road. It doesn't lead us to a dead end. Because God's love, the love that he's described previously, God's love has been poured out into our hearts. He describes this transaction. He doesn't go, God's love has been poured out into our hearts by thinking positively. God's love has been poured out into our hearts because we figured out self-discipline. It's been poured out into our hearts because we're focused, because we're working really hard. This pouring out comes from outside. It doesn't come from us. We are bent towards selfishness. We are bent towards keeping our scorecards. We're bent to not having patience. I'll be kind to you as long as you're kind to me. We can try, we can become decent people, but Paul is recognizing this real type of love's got to come from outside, and God's ready to do it. He wants to pour it into our hearts when we embrace him. He doesn't do this thing of going, okay, you got your ticket to heaven, you just kind of sit down on the bench and wait. I'll see you at on your deathbed and make sure you get in. He goes, I'm not done with you. There's so much. I want to give you my character. I want to pour who I am into this, into you. Paul didn't create this. He didn't come up with this whole idea. I mean, this has all been talked about through Jesus, through other writers. Jesus went, hey, what's the most important thing? Love the Lord your God. What's the second most important? Love other people. I had it with the first one. The second one is always tripping me up. Jesus says, hey, how will they know that you're my true followers? That you love one another. John talks about it. Hey, if you don't get love, you don't understand God, because God is fundamentally love. This is his pure character. And Paul's the one that gets this and says, look, when he makes peace with us, and he wants to give us his very best. He wants to pour his love into our hearts to change us. Because if we would love that way, that would change everything in our life, wouldn't it? This doesn't come through our hard work. It comes through the Holy Spirit, his presence in this world. He says, I just want to give this as a gift. You can't get there yourself. I got to give this to you. So let's consider. Let's do a little bit of a case study here on Paul. How does this affect him? How does this work out? A guy that Used to be, if you disagree with me, I'm going to throw you in jail. You oppose me, I'm going to make sure you get whacked. How does he handle this? Well, he had this one church in Philippi. These folks are great folks. They were a good church. He even liked them on their Facebook page. He says, I thank my God every time I remember you. Why? Because they are swell people. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel. From this day, from the first day until now, you have always been there. You've supported me. You've cheered me on. You are good folks. We get along. We even enjoy watching the Steelers together. It's good. It's right for me to feel this way about all of you since I have you in my heart. Even God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. This is a good church. They're doing good to Paul from the very first day that he became an apostle, always supporting him. And he talks with overflowing gratitude here, right? I have you in my heart. I have the affection of Christ for you. Well, no surprise there, right? Anybody's going to like who they like. But then he had this other church in Corinth. This church is a disaster. They're a mess. He actually has to write 2 letters to them. The first letter is like a manual of going, how to screw up being a Christian. Every possible type of scenario that you could imagine. Crazy stuff. Okay, look, I got to clarify this. Oh, you're doing this wrong. My goodness, this church was an absolute mess. After he corrects them, you know what they do? They come back after him. They start to criticize him. You know what? We think you're a second-rate apostle, really. You're not that important. I don't know if you even got this all right. And you know what? Sometimes you come at us and you're too harsh. Sometimes you're too soft. You're a terrible pastor. We don't want to support you. You're awful. How does Paul respond to that? Well, let's look at the second letter. It says, look here, guys. We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and opened wide our hearts to you. We are not withholding our affection from you, even while you are withholding yours from us. As a fair exchange, open wide your hearts also. We see in this instance where, how does Paul deal with people that are backstabbing him, are giving up on him, are criticizing him? He goes, my heart is wide open because the love of God has been poured in my heart. It's not because I'm a great guy, I'm a swell guy. It's because God has done this change in me. And it makes all the difference for Paul. See, when we go to real love, we find true freedom. If you go, I don't want to, real love isn't patient, guess what? You're going to live an aggravated life. Real love does keep a record of wrongs. You're going to live a bitter life because there's going to be plenty of people that do you wrong. Real love doesn't have to worry about anybody else but me. You're going to live a lonely life. God says, I want to give you who I am and change your heart. When I was in my junior year, my sister called up my mom and said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't Noel move up for the summer with me? For some strange reason, we went, sure, that sounds like a great idea. She hung up the phone and she has told me, she literally went, what have I done? I don't like this kid. Why did I even do that? It wasn't her trying to be this gracious person, to be a civilized person, a decent person. At God's prompting, beyond her natural bent, she opened a door. I went up for that summer, and man, it was cupcakes and ice cream. It was great. We never fought at all. I didn't get back at her one little bit. That's not true. World War III. It was rough sometimes. But God was doing something in the middle of that. going, I'm going to take this brokenness, this hostility, and that's not what I have for you. I have something more. I have my type of love. And the relationship began to mend and to change. I returned after I graduated from high school, lived with her for another year. God continuing to work and pour out his love into our hearts. We share the same faith, and now we are closer than ever. Not because we decided to do this. Both of us look back and go, neither one of us were interested in figuring that out. God did a miracle. He poured out love into our hearts. He made us patient and kind. He made us forgiving with one another. He brought us to a new place. If God can do that in a man like Paul, if he can do that in a relationship like I grew up in, he can do that for you. We're going to be taking communion here in just a minute. And, it is a symbol of coming to the Father's table. And you know what's great about coming to Dad's table? Is you get to ask for things. Can I borrow the car? Can I use this? Can I use that? Well, you're coming to your spiritual Father's table. Maybe you're at a place where you're going, I have run out of patience. I have run out of kindness for this person. I am consumed by the record of wrongs that are stored in my mind and my heart. I don't know how to break that. I don't know how to get past my own pride. That is a barrier that keeps me from having this right relationship. Your Father is welcoming you to his table. And you could ask today, saying, will you pour out your love into my heart? Will you give me what I can't do? Will you bring me to a new place to live and to love like you do? I challenge you, and as you come forward for this, that you can ask your Father for this good thing. So let's hear the story. On the night of his betrayal, one of the 12, one of the men that he invested in 3 years, on the night of his betrayal, that's when Jesus took the bread. He gave thanks, and he broke it. And he said, take and eat. This is my body, which is going to be broken by evil men in bad ways, even though I have done nothing wrong. I do this for you. After the meal, in the same way, he took the cup, gave thanks, and he passed it around and said, this is my blood, my life, that I freely lay down. Not because you're swell people, not because you're deserving of it. In fact, you're quite not. I have had to suffer long with you. I have had to be patient with you. But I'm giving you my very best because I love you. Take and drink, each one of you, this. This is our story.